Good morning. Welcome to the 1Spatial Australia FME 2020 5 Hot Features webinar. Welcome to the 1Spatial Australia team. I'd like to start by introducing Andrew Bashfield, the Sales Manager, Simon Laird, our Services Lead, Emma Yates, our National Marketing Manager, Tom Farrington, Senior Consultant, Daniela White, Sales, Priyanthi Palagama, Senior Consultant, Sam McDonald, Senior Consultant, Ilse Britz, Senior Consultant, Michael Stoddard, Sales Consultant, and myself, Andre Makika, as the Country Manager for 1Spatial Australia. It is our pleasure to have you with us this morning, and we hope that you're going to enjoy our 5 hot features of FME 2020. Just a bit of housekeeping. We would welcome any questions that you may have. You'll notice on the panel to your right, there is a question box, so you can type in your questions at any time. There's commercial and technical questions are welcomed. If you have a specific question for a specific speaker, please put some kind of a prefix on your question to indicate the speaker that you would like to have answer your question. If we don't get to answering your question while the webinar is on because of time constraints, we will get back to you with an answer directly to you. Just a little bit about 1Spatial. We're over 50 years of developing innovations within the geospatial solutions for the industry that we are all in. We have offices all over the world, with Cambridge in the UK being our head office. We have offices in the Netherlands, in Belgium, France, Ireland, USA, Tunisia, and in Australia, where we have an office in Melbourne and in Sydney, and with staff in all major capital cities on the eastern seaboard. We have a number of technology partners that we deal with, and in particular, what we'll be talking about today is our partnership with Safe Software, and in particular, FME. We deal in a number of industries, as you can see, from military, telecommunications, emergency services, government, transport, utilities, and so on. As I mentioned, today's presentation is primarily around FME and the 5 hot tips or 5 hot features that our technical team have thought would be of interest to you, our customers. 1Spatial is a customer-based or customer-centric business. We deliver solutions to address our customers' needs and market requirements, and we do this through collaboration with our people, our customers, and our staff. We have a number of products that we develop in-house within the 1Spatial organization, which includes such things as 1Integrate, 1Generalize, 1Edit, 1Exchange. We also have a new product called 1Data Gateway that was released earlier this year, and we have 1Integrate for ArcGIS, all of which help our customers to manage and manipulate data to make their data smarter. As I mentioned, what we will be talking about primarily today, though, is FME. FME is a desktop application, server application, and a cloud application, providing you with a data integration platform to connect, transform, and automate your data. The 1Spatial services that we provide, we facilitate product evaluation, we do demos, proof of concepts, we provide consultancy for project work. We do public and private training services where it can be at your place or at ours. And naturally, with the current COVID situation, training is exclusively online, and we provide this training on a regular basis each month. And I would welcome you to go to our website to find out when the next training session is on to suit you. We do one-to-one mentoring and FME workspace reviews. We provide annual maintenance and with all which provides an inclusive technical support for all your technical needs with regard to FME. And we have expertise from our FME consultants. These consultants consists of Simon Laird, our services lead, who'll be talking about setting yourself up with an FME service success. Tom Farrington, change detection and incremental updates. Sam McDonald, automations with FME server. Ilse Britz, reporting in FME. And Priyanthi, talking about troubleshooting FME desktop and debugging work. Plus, we'll also have a introduction from Andrew Bashfield with regard to subscription options and pricing. I'd like to now welcome Carol Murphy, our channel account manager for the Asia Pacific region. Carol works for Safe Software and has kindly agreed to stay up and be involved with our presentation this morning. And I would like to now welcome Carol to do a bit of a presentation on Safe Software. Over to you, Carol.
Thanks so much, Andre, for the introduction, and hi everyone, and thanks for joining today. As Andre mentioned, I'm actually based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, where our Safe Software head office is. So thanks for tuning in and listening to the 5 hot features of FME. I'm the channel account manager at Safe Software for Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of Asia Pacific. I've been at Safe for it's coming up to 2 years now, and I work strategically with the 1Spatial full team. So everything from technical to sales, I work with the full team. So if there's ever any questions, my email address is there. Please feel free to reach out. So I just want to go over what our Safe Software company mission is. Our 2 co-founders, who are actually still the acting CEOs, began Safe Software to help organizations understand their data and maximize the value of their data. And that is really the key goal at Safe Software, and that vision that our partners also embody when working with customers directly. There's so many different ways of how you can deploy FME. From subscription to cloud to perpetual licenses. And at the end of the day, we want to ensure that you're actually maximizing the value of that data. So if you do have questions throughout, feel free to write in as you see the key features. So a little bit on Safe Software. As I mentioned, we are in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I am a little bit in the past. It is Monday evening for me over here. We are in business 25+ years. So we are headquartered in a suburb in Vancouver called Surrey. And the image there is actually our new office that we moved into pre-COVID. So we were in the previous office for 23 years and then moved into our new office space, which is a part of the Health and Technology District in Surrey. We have over 10,000 organizations trusting us worldwide. So we work with customers across the globe, North America, South America. We have a huge presence in Europe and obviously Australasia as well, with over 128 countries working with FME. And we have over 150 partners supporting our network. So although we are just head office out of Vancouver, we don't have any other offices. It is thanks to our fantastic partners such as 1Spatial that we get to work strategically with, and they get to extend the reach of FME with customers such as yourself. So thank you for continuing to work at 1Spatial and be FME advocates. So a little bit on 1Spatial and Safe Software. You're probably wondering how we do work strategically together. So Safe and 1Spatial are in a partnership agreement. 1Spatial is a platinum partner of Safe's, which is the top tier partner that you can become with Safe Software. you know, we see 1Spatial as an extension of our staff. So they are on the front lines working with you on any technical questions, sales questions, business questions. And the great thing with us having our resellers in region is, from a time zone perspective, they get to support you. So you're not waiting for an answer from the technical team or the business team at Safe Software. And they can also provide training and a lot of extra value add. 1Spatial have been a partner with us since 1999, so quite some time. We've developed a strong relationship with the team, and they also offer, you know, product sales, technical support, as I mentioned, training on virtual, obviously during these COVID times, consulting and services, which you'll hear from Simon and his team. And a key thing, which I know we've seen a lot of requests come through of people doing free trials, is our FME cloud platform with remote access for VPN. And 1Spatial is an MSP partner, they're a premier partner. So if you do have cloud questions or wish to do a free trial of cloud, feel free to go to safe.com/cloud, do a free trial, and we can connect you with 1Spatial as your MSP partner. So there's a lot of resources available. If you're either new to FME or an existing user, there is a lot of information, and a lot of customers usually ask where to start. So we do have our brand new FME community, which I would highly recommend tuning into and taking a peek at. This has over 10,000 global users, so our customers from across the world and our resellers writing in here. You can ask questions, you can chat to the Safe Software team directly, and even just submit ideas, or if you've seen a new cool workspace or discovered something interesting for FME. For knowledge and training, we do have training available on our website and on-demand resources, but as our time zones don't really align with one another, I would recommend logging on to the 1Spatial training page, and you'll see all their upcoming courses that you can register for. And then technical support. So we do work closely with the technical team at 1Spatial, whether that be with support cases, but we also do have our live chat functionality available too. So if you did want to speak to someone directly to Safe Software, feel free to join that functionality and you'll be able to chat to someone live. And that is just a little overview on Safe Software. It's always nice to know who the organization is of the solution that is being discussed. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to email me. But on that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Andre.
Thank you, Carol. I would now like to welcome Simon Laird, our services lead, who will do a presentation this morning on setting yourself up for FME server success. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Andre. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I guess to start off, really what I'm trying to get out of these next few slides is really just some tips, hints, and suggestions on helping you get the most out of your data and using FME Server to do that. So you've built a workspace in FME Desktop. It works well, does what it should. You're all happy. Now you're considering moving it and publishing it to FME Server. What should you take into consideration? So you've got a workspace and you want to move to server. FME Server provides a dizzying array of options to run your existing workspace. How will your workspace run? Is it a user or another process that will trigger it? Will a user trigger it manually, for example, by logging in and once a day hitting go, or perhaps it run on a schedule? So FME Server provides out of the box quite a wide range of ways of enabling your workspace to run either manually or automatically. Other options that may exist also for you to use are FME Server automations, which we'll cover a little bit later. Or perhaps you're looking into using an FME Server web app, which provides you quite a neat way of exposing your FME Workbench as a web application that users could securely log into and trigger a workspace to run by either uploading some data or filling in some parameters and hitting run. So really, when you're thinking of migrating to server, you need to, where possible, make it easier for yourself by working with the data sets, the infrastructure, and the other items that you're using when your workspace runs on FME Server itself. In some cases, you don't easily have access to the infrastructure or for example, the data that will be used when you're running on FME server. So where possible, make it easier for yourself. Take local copies. If you're working with a database, take an extract of a database, for example, in another format such as SQLite or something else that you can use that will mimic a database in the way that you'll interact with it in your workbench. And effectively treat your local development workspace and try and make it as close as you can to the way it will operate and run on server. Other things to consider, limit what is hard-coded in your workspaces. You don't want to get to a situation where you're publishing something to server and you're having to suddenly unpick everything and change all the parameters to point to the right directory paths to where your data is, or for example, where you've got other parameters that are hard-coded that you want to change. Where possible, use parameters, and also scripted parameters is something that you may look into considering as well, further enhancing the flexibility you have. Also, make use of FME server parameters. So these provide some further information about your workspace when it's running on server, which will hopefully help you to make sense of, debug, figure out perhaps if something's gone wrong, where the issue lies. Other things to consider, you can, in FME desktop, but also in server, use external files to hold your configuration. So for example, you might use a separate file, whether it's text or other, that contains your paths to your source data, or perhaps contains some parameters that tells FME how to actually run the workspace, or how to populate the parameters to then use in a workspace. Putting configuration in external files further gives you a bit of flexibility that if you do need to change something, you either don't have to open up FME Workbench and then change it and republish it, but also gives you the flexibility to have someone modifying a configuration file who perhaps doesn't have any FME knowledge and can edit the configuration file and then simply rerun the workspace on server without having to actually know how it all works under the hood. Other things to consider, in the past, when you had, for example, different environments within your organization, perhaps a dev, test, prod environments, moving workspaces and packages between different servers was quite cumbersome and it took quite a lot of time. FME Server Projects now provides you with a much neater and simpler way of moving entire projects, which could include anything from workspaces, schedules, data, users, all these types of things that you would use and have that you use to not only control your workspace, but all configuration around it. You can bundle that up into a single project now, which then you can extract and download as a zip file, which then gives you a very quick and easy way to move entire workspaces or projects and repositories between servers quite easily. So if things aren't working out too well, FME produces a huge amount of log files, which can be quite daunting when you first see and first start to look at them. But really, they provide a lot of information that will help you to understand perhaps what's gone wrong with your process. Starting with job logs, they're effectively what you're used to seeing in desktop, provides you all the detail about a single workspace. There's also a whole range of logs that are produced for all the individual components that make up FME Server, the core, the queues, all the services that FME Server runs and provides, like the job download, streaming, submitter, the REST API, and so on. Other things to consider, if there's any differences between your FME desktop and FME server deployment, perhaps you're using a different operating system to what FME server is running, or a different version of FME. All these things need to be considered if you're having some difficulty or issues running. And then finally, just to reiterate, even if you can't interpret the log files that FME server is perhaps providing you with, they will, in most cases, be the method of determining what has gone wrong, and they will be, if you do require support, fundamentally what we'll go back to try and use to understand what has gone wrong and work with you to solve whatever problem you may have encountered. So that's it from me. Were there any questions?
Okay, Simon, we do have a question that's come through. The question here is, what is a good resource for getting started with FME Server?
Okay, sure. So really the best starting point would be the FME community, which is on the SAFE website. That provides a great, resource of articles, tutorials, and other on-demand videos that will really give you a very quick introduction to FME Server, but then also a bit more in depth of how to administer and manage an FME Server, but also how to author and develop workspaces for FME Server. Other things to consider, you can get a 60-day trial of FME Server, which we can help you get set up and running so that you can actually deploy and install FME Server on your local machine. And then also the other thing worth considering is 1Spatial offers a range of FME training courses, which will be covered later, and they cover FME Server administration and authoring, which are currently online and hopefully back to face-to-face in the future.
Thank you very much, Simon. Okay, we will keep going. And our next presenter is Tom Farrington, who is a senior consultant with 1Spatial and is also the manager for our FME training. Tom is going to talk about change detection and incremental updates. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Andre. Welcome, everybody. As Andre said, my name is Tom Farrington, and I'm a senior consultant with 1Spatial. Today, I'm going to talk about some tips about updating our database data sets. So we have our standard full load of data coming through. We've got a very basic workspace to do this. It's just going to take our complete updated features and upload them into our database, truncating the existing or using drop and create. They can take quite a long time with large data sets. It's not very efficient, and the more database operations we're doing, the more risk we've got of corrupting our data. So the solution to this, or at least to minimize the risk on this, is not to do this sort of operation, but to move into incremental data updates. So we want to insert new features, delete any old features, and any features that have just had some changes made to them, we just change those. This has fewer database operations, so there's less risk to the security of our data. This is quite easy to do if our data supplier provides an incremental feed, but obviously not all of them do, and this might be something that we're generating within our own organizations. So what can we do? Well, all the database writers do have an FME format attribute to control what sort of operation they're going to do. This attribute is called FME_DB_operation, and you can see we've just set it in the dialog box here, and whatever value that is set to, and it takes 3 values: insert, delete, and update. So for every feature that comes in, the writer can do a different operation. The only other thing we have to set is how are we going to identify the features for update and delete, and we need to just set that through the unique ID, whatever that value or attribute might be, and it could be a combination in there. Obviously, we can get FME to do some work here to determine what operation it needs to be, whether it is going to be an insert or a delete or what have you. But we do have the change detector transformer as well. And this helps us to do a lot of this. It will default to setting the format attribute for us, so we then don't need to be setting the values itself. The change detector will do that for us. If we just set it up with defaults, it'll be testing the geometry and the attributes for any changes. And to do this, we basically send in the current table plus our updated feed, which is a complete table as well, push it through the change detector, and the defaults, as I say, we're going to try and match all attributes, and then check all the geometry. And then it'll, if we don't actually specify the update key, so what identifies the same feature, then we just get a series of inserts and deletes. But where we do put in the update key, whatever that might have been, we do get updates, and we can then also get a list of changes for what has changed in any updated feature. So again, it's really speeding this up in doing that. Obviously, the change detector itself, once we start looking at complex geometries and so on, and large data sets, it can be fairly slow, but we can speed that up as well, and move into using the simplified version using a CRC calculator transformer. We push that onto both inputs to the change detector. We can then just calculate a value that represents each feature and use that to see if there's any change. So we're no longer doing a spatial check. It's just an attribute check, one value against another. We could still use the update key to identify updates. Obviously, we're not going to get a list of what's changed because we're only checking on a CRC, so it'll just say the CRC value has changed. So there's no point in creating that list in that case, but we don't need to check geometry, and we're only going to check one attribute. So it actually operates much faster running through there normally. And that is about it for me. So yes, are there any questions?
Thank you, Tom. Yes, we do have a question that has come through. Question is, what does CRC stand for?
I wondered about that one. CRC is the cyclic redundancy check. Essentially, it's a hash value that is used to represent whatever it is we choose to put into the hash, whether it's geometry or attributes or a combination of both.
Thank you, Tom.
No problem.
Okay, we are now going to move to Sam McDonald, a senior consultant with 1Spatial. Unfortunately, Sam has taken sick today, so he's unable to present. Simon is going to do his presentation in his place, and we'll be talking about automations with FME Server. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks again, Andre. So let's jump in. So let's get into this. Automations, they're a great tool for enterprise integration using FME Server. We really, I guess, fundamentally, FME is trying to avoid data and applications acting in silos. So no interactivity. Each application within your organization just does one thing and it just acts on its own. That's really what we're trying to avoid. Automations gives us a neat way of providing some flexibility around the way FME workspaces run on server and interactivity. So you can really use automations to power your integration of your processes. And as you can see here, automations, this is an example of an automation. Automations are similar to workbenches in that you've got a drag and drop interface in FME Server, but rather than placing readers and writers and transformers on the canvas, each item is either a trigger, which we have on the left there, which is a JMS trigger, action, which are the workspaces in the middle, and then you also have external actions as well, which you could use to call another external service such as an API or to send an email, for example. So jumping into the triggers. Triggers are effectively the enabler of your automations. So FME Server comes out of the box with triggers that enable interactivity in and also externally to your FME Server. So within your FME Server, some trigger examples might be a schedule. So you've got a particular task that runs on a schedule, perhaps daily or hourly. Or in other internal ones might be using server topics to communicate between different workspaces or between different processes, or externally. So some examples of that might be communicating with a cloud service, so perhaps S3, which is an AWS service for storing data, or perhaps something in Azure. Other things you might be using external to FME Server, but within your organization might be a directory watch, or perhaps a webhook or something else to then trigger your workspace to run. So automations, I guess, fundamentally provide a straightforward way to not only invoke or control how and when your workspace starts up, but also to parse and populate the workspace parameters for you, so that you not only control when your workspace starts, but how it starts up and then what it does. So what is FME without FME Desktop? Ideally, users develop their workflows in a manner that benefits from not only the options that come with automations, but also then provide you the flexibility to get your workbench into server and have it wired up and configured to work quite simply. So automation triggers, they capture and provide details in the form of a JSON snippet. And an example of this might be a directory watch. So we've got FME Server watching a directory to see if there's any changes, perhaps there's a new file or an existing file has been modified. The trigger here would be a JSON snippet that would include the file path of that file that's either been created, updated, or deleted perhaps, and also includes the time that file change was detected as well. And this then gives you the ability to not only start the workspace up and say, here's the file we want to run, but as it provides you with a time, it then gives you the ability to then effectively see when that file was changed. So that's a pretty simple example of the trigger and the way that it provides the detail in a JSON snippet. But if you've got a trigger that might be more complex, that might be triggered by something else externally, that JSON snippet would obviously include more detail other than just the file path. It might include a message or something else that needs to then be utilized within your workspace. So if you just pause here, automation previously or schedules in the past, they'd been used to effectively trigger a workspace, pass something in and some parameters to a workbench, carry out some sort of process, an ETL, and then write out some data, and then that's it. Perhaps if you've gone a second step, you might call a second workspace via an FME job submitter. Automations takes this another step further in 2020. Automation writers, which is a new feature this year, provides us the ability to write data not only out to an output format file, but also gives us the ability to write data back into an automation. And so what this does is enables us to use a workspace to control what happens next in FME Server. So it might come back and provide us different ports, which we can then use to control what the next step is within the workspace by passing those parameters back into the automation to then determine what the next step is in our process. So a good example of this might be, we've got a workflow that processes a range of raster files, which are processed individually, and they come across in sort of a certain time frame, but they all turn up individually. As they arrive, the automation kicks off a process to process each raster individually in parallel, so across different engines. It's really fast and efficient because each file is processed individually. And then once the final raster, file 85, has been processed, we then have a second step, which then moves all 85 files from our working directory to our production directory, for example, where the files are picked up and used by other processes. The example here is that we can now control when that 85th file is processed. We can then set in the automation to say, all right, that file has been received. Now let's proceed to the next step of moving the data to a separate directory. So to take this one step further, automations now provide you the ability to loop a particular workflow within FME Server. So some users might be familiar with the looping you can do in a custom transform in FME desktop. This is similar, but provides you a bit more flexibility in controlling the way that your process runs subsequent times, and a bit of a slightly different approach to how it works. In saying that, obviously, any sort of looping, users should be careful to avoid setting yourself up where you've got an infinite loop that just keeps resubmitting itself and tying up your FME server. An example of where this might be a good approach or a good way of implementing your particular process is where you're, for example, if you're interacting with an external service, such as an API or a web service, working on the web, as most users would be aware, sometimes things don't quite work. They might be down or have an intermittent issue. You could set up a particular process that interacts with an API, and if it does receive a certain error or fails, you could handle that failure to effectively resubmit the job and try again, so that it goes away, tries to interact with the API or the web service, and then if it doesn't work, then we can pause and retry, and after several reattempts, we can then fail out gracefully rather than just having a schedule that effectively starts up a job once, and if it fails, that's it, it hasn't worked. And so providing this looping functionality gives the user a few more options in server to control how and when the looping occurs, and also how to handle job failures when they're unexpected or expected. So looping, it's something that's really at the bleeding edge of what's arrived in 2020, but it's something that I think provides a lot of excitement and flexibility for the future. So are there any questions for Sam or myself?
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Sam, in absence, putting that together for us. There has been a question that has come through, Simon. A question for you is, what would you suggest to avoid infinite loops when connecting workbenches to themselves in automations?
Yeah, so it's a potentially troublesome situation you may find yourself in if you're using loops and you're not setting them up to either fail out or run only to a certain number of attempts. So I guess it's similar to when you're working with loops in any other scripting or programming language. You need to effectively set your loop up so that it will only run for a certain number of times, so that you aren't stuck in a situation where it just keeps running continuously and ties up your engines. The way that you can do this with FME Server is that every time an automation reruns a job, it provides effectively that trigger JSON snippet, which then controls or provides detail of how many times something's run, which you could then use to pass a message with a counter in your workspace to effectively count the number of times a particular job is run, so that if it's run 10 times, that you can set it to run up to a maximum of 15, and then any more it will effectively stop and go to the next step. So like any scripting language, you just need to set yourself up in a way that means that you'll be able to handle this situation and not let it get away from you.
Thank you, Simon. We've got another question that's come through. What happens if the workspace is triggered to run while the workspace is already running? Example, two customers' request comes through at almost the same time.
Yeah, so depending on how many engines you have, if you've got like two engines and you've got one engine running the first request, the second engine could start up and run the second request. Obviously, depending on what your process is doing, if it's trying to process the same data or for example, write out over itself, the second process will overwrite the first. But if it's, for example, processing some sort of input from the user, they'll happily run side by side. There should be no issue there.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next presenter, Ilse Britz, a senior consultant with 1Spatial, and Ilse will do reporting with FME. Welcome, Ilse.
Thank you, Andre. Good morning, everybody. Just wait. There we go. So I'm going to talk a bit about how to use HTML reports within your workflows that you're currently using. So all of us can run FME workbenches, but sometimes you need to report on what is happening. And HTML reports, or the HTML suite of transformers, give you that option to create clear and concise reports in a formatted way that is user-friendly. So the HTML report generator can create a web report that includes geometry and attributes and can be customized further with extra knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The HTML layouter can take a combination of different HTML reports and combine them into a report that is more sophisticated that you can present. And then HTML report generator creates an output as HTML_content that can be used in various other transformers that you can use, but you can also just write the report out as an HTML writer, or you can use your output from the reports as an input for the body of an email transformer. So the example that I'm using here, say you've got a large data enhancement project where certain FME workbenches have to run to validate data that's being cleaned. So the workbench is running, it's doing its job, but your project manager, he wants to know, is the weekly target for cleaning features being met? What cleaning tasks have most errors? And say which data cleaning group is not making the targets. All these things you can set up as an extra section in your current workbench that can create this as a report that can automatically be emailed either to your team or your project management, or it can be as an input to other business intelligence software that is being used by the project. So HTML report, you can put in various attributes. The best way is to classify your error types if you're reporting on errors, to group them in perhaps polygon overlaps or polygon gaps or any other rules that you've set up. You can also set your rules or your classifications based on your project Gantt chart, perhaps group them per task or per dates that needs to be completed. The options is infinitive for creating your reports. As I said, you can then use that as a report that is sent to the project team with perhaps attachments of detailed errors that's come up, or you can have a body of your HTML generator report and then an attachment again of a different HTML report that goes into more detail of the specific issues for that week. So using your HTML report generator, the specific tips that I would suggest to do is you have your standard out-of-the-box things to create your HTML report. But the nice thing that's included is custom HTML, where you can go and make your own reports based on extra knowledge of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. So you can import a table, you can use different types of maps to create your report. So you can also add more content to your HTML by using feature merger, by combining, say, few or more tables together and input that into your report. You can add website links into the HTML report. Perhaps if you got your report, but you also link into the general project web page or any specific things that is relevant for your reporting. So say you are reporting on dates, certain tasks has to be finished before a certain start date of the next project, or you've got tasks that needs to be finished on the latest date that it can be finished, and you need to combine 20 tasks will be finished on this date, or 27 tasks might be late because they are going to be 5 days late. So the tip on working with date and time transformers is convert your dates into FME standard for any date calculations. it's specifically, like I said, for the statistics calculator or evaluation transformer that you might use. If it's an FME standard date, it's just easier to do that calculations because FME understands it better. So only convert your date to a user-friendly, say date, month, year for your HTML report. And once again, some of your input is a day, month, year. Convert to FME standard date, do all your calculations for your progress report, and then convert back to your day, month, year. And that is my hot tip for 2020. Just go to the next slide. So my next slide has got a few useful links if you want to go into more detail of how to generate report, how to customize it, where to do what. And like I said, you can also put in maps into your report. It can be as complex or dynamic and interactive as you want. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Ilse. Yes, we do have a question for you that's come through for you. The question is, can we run a report workflow in FME Server?
Yes, you can. Like I said, it's the HTML report generator and how you can use it. It's very interactive, and you can run it as part of a schedule, overnight schedule, and print out or send the reports to your various teams. It can be a response or a trigger in automations, as Simon has talked about in the previous presentation.
Thank you very much, Ilse. Our next presentation is from Priantha, to his friends. He's senior consultant with 1Spatial and is our manager for our support line. Pri is going to talk about troubleshooting FME desktop and debugging workspaces. Pri, welcome, and over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Priantha, working with 1Spatial as a senior consultant and looking after FME support for more than 5 years. Today, I'm going to provide a few tips under 2 subtopics, troubleshooting FME desktop and debugging workspace. Waiting, slide. Okay. So when it crashes FME desktop or throws an error message while you are working on FME desktop, it requires troubleshooting the issue. According to my experience, licensing issues are the most common issues in FME desktop. Could be FME licensing or third-party software licensing, such as history licenses requires to enable some history formats. Issues in external connections is another common problem. Could be in database connections or online connections, such as ArcGIS Online. Rarely will get FME Workbench crash, usually requires reinstalling FME desktop to resolve the issue. Now let's see what we can do for troubleshooting FME desktop issues. Where to start? Obviously, first place is the error message. As in this case, it gives you an idea about the error. It says no suitable driver. So you can refer to FME desktop help documentation to find required drivers and install them to rectify the issue. If the error message doesn't provide enough information, you'll be able to see the log for more information by clicking the Show Log button. So well done if you resolve the issue. But what's the next step if the issue persists? We have to look for support. FME community, which you can access through community.safe.com, is the best place to look for support. It has knowledge base under different topics, and you will be able to list the relevant articles by entering the error message into search. If you require further information, then glitch in the slides. Sorry, I'm again going to. Alright, yeah. So if you require further information for diagnosing the issue, you can download the system information batch file from the link given here and run it to generate FME report. FME report contains useful information such as system information, registry, FME installations, etc. And the same article provides guide to interpret the report. If you're unable to troubleshoot the issue yourself, then you need to request some external support. 1Spatial is more than happy to assist you through our dedicated support channels, support@1spatial.com or 1300-290-686 and press 1 for support. Please remember to provide as much information as possible regarding the issue when you are contacting support. Explain the error, when it happened, how it could be triggered, provide screenshots of the error with logs. FME report generated on the machine will be really helpful for us to diagnose the issue. Let's move on to our next subtopic, debugging FME workspaces. So common causes for issues in FME workspaces are corrupted or bad data, including incorrect coordinate system, geometry issues, attribute issues, and it could be access issues, and sometimes incorrect settings in transformers or incorrect workflow, and it could be a limitation of readers and writers. Certain formats are not available in 64-bit installation, for example, and rarely could be corrupted transformers or bugs in FME software. What's the debugging process? I highly recommend this article in the given FME community link for any FME user, those who hasn't read it. It provides step-by-step guide to identify the issues in workspaces. Therefore, I'm not going to repeat the information in the article. Instead, I'll give you a few tips which will be useful for executing the steps in the article. Run menu provides options for feature caching, which makes it easy to view features at each step and facilitate executing parts of the workspace. For example, once you enable feature caching, you can run between selected transformers or run to selected. So there are different options that you can execute. Also, you can add breakpoints into links between transformers and enable stop at breakpoints to pass features one by one to investigate the issue. FME users are familiar with Visual Preview and Data Inspector, so it provides a lot of information about datasets and features, and visually see them, and then you can see all these properties and field values and table reviews there. Also, by right-clicking the dataset, you can add colors to them and mark coordinates, also mark in nodes. A lot of options are there. Also, there's a tab or translation log. By clicking on the tab, you can access translation logs. And when you need to package sample data with workspaces to send through to support, for example, it is easy to run the workspace with some sample data and save it as a template. So you can send a single file with data in workspace. Always use rejected port in the transformers to capture any features rejected and log them when you are building the workflow. This will save your time in debugging, especially when the workspace has hundreds of transformers. It is possible to install more than one version of FME desktop side by side. Therefore, it will be useful to have a copy of most recent release of FME desktop to test whether any issue in your current installation has been resolved in the new release. Also, you can follow the given links for workaround for unknown issues. So what's hot in FME 2020? Data-aware transformer dialog is a new feature in FME 2020.1. When the feature cache is on, you will be able to access values of the selected attribute within transformers. This feature will be helpful in debugging process to compare values. Finally, always check FME community for information on bugs, workarounds, and other useful information. And 1Spatial support is always there to help you. Please remember to explain the issue clearly and provide logs, copy of workspaces, sample data, and details of FME installation and operating system when you are contacting support. I am happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you, Pri. We do have a question that has come through. Where does FME Desktop store license files or floating license server connection details?
Yeah, this is a common question from FME users who use floating licenses, especially when they get issues in connecting to licensing features. So in that case, usually they need to reset these connections. Because surely these licensing information and license files and these connection information are stored in two places in FME Desktop. First place to look is the FME Desktop installation directory. Usually it is C program files FME. And within that folder, you will get another folder named licenses. So inside that folder, you will get licensing files, if any, with the extension of .fmelink. And if you have a floating license server connection, then you will get these connections files with the extension of .dat. You can open any of these files in a notepad and see what's there, inside there. And if you need to reset the connection to the floating license server, you can just delete this .dat file, then close the FME desktop and reopen it. It will automatically create the that file. And the other location that you need to look for is the default shared location, usually the C program data, F software, and FME. So again, within that folder, you will get a folder named licenses, where you can find all these FME license and connection files.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pri. Our next presenter is Andrew Bashfield, who will be talking to you about FME subscription options and their pricing. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Andre. To all of our webinar attendees, over the last 6 months, I've noticed a change in the way our customers are purchasing licenses. If they're looking to get a substantial number of licenses, or if they're going for server licenses, I'm finding that they're heading towards subscriptions. So if you haven't considered subscriptions, I hope you can learn something from this little presentation that can benefit you. There's really two broad kinds of licensing that we provide at 1Spatial. There's perpetual licensing, which is where you actually buy the license as if it's an asset, and then you normally add maintenance on top of that each year. Or there's subscription licensing. In that situation, you're treating the license as an operating cost, and you are, I haven't changed the slide, Andre, and you are accessing time, whether it's annual, monthly, or hours. And now with FME subscriptions, we actually have two kinds, unlimited subscriptions and the usage-based enterprise subscription. I'm going to focus initially on unlimited subscriptions. So that means that those customers who qualify, who are in utilities or in local government and meet the tier criteria, can access unlimited licenses of FME desktop and server software. And the customers that fit that criteria come back to us saying, this is unbelievable. They just don't have to think about finding more money to get an extra license. They just pay their yearly fee and they get everything that they want. They're so impressed. So the kind of benefits that they're finding is that flexibility. They don't have to worry about they use their operating expenditure funds. They find that they can take the guesswork out of budgeting. One annual fee is all that they need to worry about. There's no time lag on projects. So often a project will start 6 months after the annual maintenance, and normally they would have to go out and raise an extra budget to make a purchase. They don't have to worry. They just contact us and say, I'll have some more licenses, please. And those licenses are provided to them at no extra cost. So how does it work? For both the utility and for local government, it works on tiers. And on the left-hand side, you can see the number of tiers. They either work on population or customers, depending on whether it's a local government or a utility. And if you fit within those broad bands, you can see the annual subscription amount. And how many licenses can you get for that annual subscription amount? It's unlimited. Not everybody fits into those categories. Some councils are much bigger than the tiers, some utilities are bigger, or sometimes you won't be a utility or a local government, you might be an engineering company. So what can you get as far as subscriptions goes? Well, we provide the enterprise subscription, and that's based, the cost of that is based on the number of licenses used. Here's how it works. Basically, the number of licenses that you need is added up. We come to a total, there's some totals on the right-hand side, and we just use an average or a multiplier of 0.35. And so you're only paying 35% of that total each year. Don't forget that when you have the annual enterprise subscription, the annual maintenance is also included in that cost. So you're never having to pay a separate annual maintenance fee. So let's have a look at some scenarios, some combinations of licenses. This one I call the desktop only deployment. So if you were looking to have floating licenses around your organization, you wanted 5 in total, you would purchase, normally you would purchase an FME database edition, for instance, first floating license and some additional floating licenses. They would total up to $42,700 Australian dollars. But with an enterprise license, enterprise subscription, you only pay $15,000 per year. And remember, if you were buying these licenses as perpetual, you'd also be paying 20% as your annual maintenance fee. You don't have to do that with an enterprise subscription. That's a desktop deployment. Let's look at a combination of desktop and server. So here we've got the first floating license, database edition. You might need Esri edition, but you might even be able to get away with professional edition. So it would be a different scenario. But in this example, adding up those two big budget items together, $42,000 worth, you can get them for $15,000 straight away. And for larger organizations wanting to do a broader based deployment, let's have a look at the situation where we've got eight desktop licenses. We've got 2 engines on an FME server for production, and we've got an FME server for UAT, for testing, for staging. If all of those licenses total up to about $107,000, it's all covered under a $40,000 a year enterprise subscription. So it certainly is a good way for an organization to get complete coverage of all their needs for a much lower upfront cost. Now, there's other kinds of subscriptions, and one I want to highlight today is called dynamic engines. So dynamic engines are purchased by the number of processing hours. Dynamic engines are best suited when the need for data processing varies. For example, if you're expecting a large spike in data processing, you could add 100 engines for that week and only pay for the processing time used. Your per hour cost gets cheaper as you buy more hours. Let's have a look at how it works. I've got a picture of Don Murray up there. So Don is one of the 2 founders of the company. He specializes in leading the development of our server technology. Okay, here's the cost. So these dynamic engines are extra engines on your FME server implementation, whether that's on your own equipment or you put it onto a cloud platform. So processing hours, you can get 3,500 processing hours for a cost of $5,000. And that means unlimited engines, but only processing when you've got a need that goes beyond that first engine. So if you've got a peak load, or you've got multiple people hitting the server wanting to run their processes, that's when it kicks in. There's no cost if it's not being used. The other technology that we have is FME Cloud, and we have a number of implementations of FME Cloud that we're supporting in Australia. So FME Cloud is the hosted version of FME Server. It's the ultimate platform for connecting the web, combining the automation power of FME Server with the flexibility of the cloud. So the key items about this, the reason that people go for it is you get FME server functionality, but you don't have to worry about the server platform itself. You don't have to worry about setting up a relationship with a cloud provider. You don't have to worry about installing FME server on your own equipment. If you decide that you want to run a workflow on FME server, it only takes minutes to get it set up. And you've got much better security with FME server, FME cloud than you would have in your own environment. Plus, you've got the ability to trial FME cloud up to the value of 250 hours. Here's a look at the costs, and this is the cost for the different levels. And if I can get this slide to stay still. Okay, there's something extra that we offer with FME Cloud, and we're actually providing this for customers right now. And that is, although SAFE is responsible for the operating system, hardware failure and networking for FME Cloud, normally the customer is responsible for loading the data up, for monitoring how it's going. You can actually ask 1Spatial to do that for you. So we are a MSP, which means a managed support package and managed services partner. We can provide that as an added service for you so that you don't have to do any of the monitoring of the system. If things are getting overloaded, we can fix that problem for you. We can actually set up the entire instance for you. So if you're interested in FME Cloud and you want to be completely hands-free, just come and talk to us. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Andre.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. There have been a couple of questions that have come through. One of them being, do we offer a free trial of dynamic engines similar to the cloud?
Yeah, we do. By default, you can access 2 standard engines and 100 hours of dynamic engines time in every free trial of FME server.
Okay. The other question that's come through, a person has said that they noticed that on the website, they previously read that there was you could only run dynamic engines for 12 months if you bought it. Is that the case?
Yeah. That's been picked up by customers, and when I saw it, I went, is that right? We've actually had Don Murray come back to us and tell us specifically that that is not the case. It was the case in the planning. The early marketing material did refer to a 12-month expiry. That expiry has been removed. There's no expiry on the life of dynamic engines. So you can buy the smallest amount, 3,500 hours, and just run that till it runs out. You'll be able to see when it's getting close. If you want to top it up, you just buy another pack of data. But that pack of data can last 2, 3, 4 years. There's no expiry date on it.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Just very quickly to wrap up, 1Spatial FME services, sales support and training. We've been doing it since 2004. We've been a platinum partner since 2011. We have a dedicated support team for desktop, server, and cloud. Our skill sets, we have certified staff in FME professional, server, and trainers. We facilitate product evaluation, FME consultancy, public and bespoke training services, and as always, technical support at support@1spatial.com or on our free call number 1300 290 686. We'd like to thank you very much. We hope that these 5 hot features will fire you up to use FME more productively going into the future. We'd like to also ask you to reserve the 27th of October for 4:30 for our next webinar, which will be on finding out the latest on our One Data Gateway product. Again, to get in touch, contact us at sales.australia@1spatial.com for any sales or information that you may want. 1300 290 686. And more than welcome to visit our website to have a look at all of the products that we have to offer. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and wish you well and all health and happiness and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you very, very much.